Well, welcome to News Nation. You know, many of you struggle to understand what motivates how President Trump says and does many things. Well, there are few, if any, who can explain what motivates Donald John Trump more or better than Steve Bannon. You know him as the former White House chief strategist, but he is certainly one of the architects of MAGA, as well as of Trump's 2016 presidential win. You know, he was in limbo for a bit, right? You may remember after calling a meeting that Trump's son and advisors had with Russians as potentially treasonous, but he's too valuable to stay estranged. You know, this guy's got some past. He was in the Navy. He worked at the Pentagon. He worked on Wall Street. He was in film production, of course, in politics, and now podcasting. And he's gaining traction more and more away from the righty fringe. But he certainly still injects the warrior spirit that drives MAGA. And he took his lumps as part of Trump world. He served months in jail for refusing to comply with a subpoena connected to the January 6th committee. He was also pardoned by Trump for federal charges, or from federal charges, involving a charity effort to fund the building of the wall between the Mexican-American border. Then New York State brought charges. Remember, a president can't pardon you from state charges. And Bannon just pleaded guilty as part of a conditional discharge deal. So it seems that the past is behind him. So I want to talk about our present and our potential future, how he can explain what we're seeing in the administration and what his role might be. Because this is the guy behind much of the aggressive messaging. America being at war, the Democrats being the enemy, the media are the enemy of the people. Okay, you've heard Trump say that a lot, but Bannon coined it, okay, in terms of this iteration of usage. The administrative state, that there needs to be shock troops to take control of the government institutions. He infamously predicted that all hell would break loose on January 6th. So I want to see where his mind is on what we're all living through together and what his role may be going forward. Joining me now, White House chief strategist at one time of the first Trump administration, host of Bannon's War Room, Mr. Steve Bannon. Thank you for taking the opportunity.
Chris, thanks for having me on News Nation, and I appreciate you.
So the only thing that you're not going to like talking about, we'll talk about first. I'm watching CPAC, and they put up a poll of potential, you know, next generation, right, post-Trump. You are second on the list after the VP as people getting the nod at CPAC to be president. A lot of people were surprised by this. My first question, you have anything to do with putting your name in that list because you have presidential ambitions?
No. And President Trump, I'm a firm believer that President Trump will run and win again in 2028. So I've already endorsed President Trump. A man like this comes along once every century if we're lucky. We've got him now. He's on fire, and I'm a huge supporter. Want to see him again in 2028.
And obviously, anybody who doesn't like what you say but judges it as a function of a lack of intelligence doesn't know anything about you. I don't make that mistake. You're a smart guy. You know he's term limited. How do you think he gets another term?
We're working on it. I think we'll have a couple of alternatives. Let's say that. We'll see. We'll see what the definition. We'll see what the definition of term. We'll see what the definition of term limit is.
All right. Well, so you're talking about litigating this issue because I don't want people to listen to our interview and say Bannon's cooking up an insurrection. Bannon is cooking up. You know what I mean? I want people to get a straight take on where your head is. What are you suggesting?
Chris, as you know, I've had greater long shots than this. When we supported President Trump after the election, I realize you don't believe the election in 2020 is stolen. We do. We fervently believe that. When President Trump went back to Mar-a-Lago on January 20th, 2021, he was the longest of long shots to return to the White House. We said that day in our podcast and doubled down, having President Trump's back, that he was coming back not just to win the primary, he would win the White House, and we had to get organized and drive that victory and also start working on all the policies. What's called Project 2025 or the America First Policy Institute, but all those different think tanks that started putting in the policies that you're seeing today in what we call Flood the Zone or Days of Thunder or however you want to describe it, but this is many years in the making. So we've had greater long shots than Trump 2028, and we've got a lot of stuff we're working on there. We're not prepared to talk about it publicly, but in a couple of months, I think we will be.
But you are not suggesting revolution or overthrow or anything that people would condemn.
Chris, we just won one of the biggest sweeping victories. We're in the middle of a 1932 type realignment if we can continue on and continue to have populist policies, populist nationalist policies. We have African American men coming to our side. We have Hispanics coming to our side. So no, we're huge believers in democracy because we know how to get votes out. We know how to get low propensity, low information voters out to support the president's policies. The anti-democratic forces, I think you're seeing them today in the courts. I mean, they're trying to obstruct a sitting president of the United States from fulfilling his executive mandate. So no, we're the big believers in democracy, and we show it because we won this unbelievable come from behind, not just in 2016, as you know, but in 2024 when virtually everybody ruled Trump out.
There's no question about that. And in 2024, people did not see him making the kind of comeback that he did. And that is certainly a historical comeback, no question. But I just wanted to make it clear for people so that they can't paint you as, you know, suggesting revolution. Your analogy is to 32 and how FDR extended it. You know, the Constitution probably gets in the way.
But I firmly believe in the revolution you're seeing going on now, the revolution of common sense to deconstruct the administrative state. You're seeing that battle and that combat politically and legally in federal courts every second, every day. And if your audience, I know they love you, but they ought to start paying attention to also this greater arc of this massive fight that's going on for the direction of this republic.
Listen, we talk about it here all the time. So help me understand this. If you are so simpatico with what's going on, how did you allow Elon Musk to become the right-hand man of President Trump and arguably cause him a lot of agita in effectuating DOGE, which is something that should have like 100% acceptance by the American people? Who's against waste, fraud, and abuse? So how did that happen?
Who's against waste, fraud, and abuse is the administrative state and its rogue element, the deep state. Look, Elon, and he and I have huge, almost unbridgeable differences on so many things like transhumanism and technology and visas and immigration, all that. But he backed our play. He very early on in, I think, June and July of last year, backed this kind of grassroots effort to go get low propensity voters, low information voters. He put $250 million. It's never been done before. He also was kind of a supporter of this merger of the Bobby Kennedy Make America Healthy Again with MAGA that brought out all those red-pilled moms. And that was a huge effort. He's also, as you know, I'm one of the architects of the deconstruction administrative state. He came up with the DOGE, which are really shock troops into the system. It's a trauma-inducing effort into the administrative state, and all of it's not pretty. But I think it's been pretty effective to date. And I realized today in the courts he had a pretty big reversal, at least on the surface of it, a reversal. But the audience has to understand. We are running $2 trillion deficits. We basically spend $6.5 trillion. We take in about $4.5 trillion. That $2 trillion deficit goes to our debt. It has to be refinanced every year. This is what embedding inflation. We have to cut it. There's two ways you can cut it, either programmatically, which we're going to do through the appropriations process, or you go find waste, fraud, and abuse. It's never terribly pleasant, but his effort is making some progress. I hope it makes some progress, Chris, on what he said it's going to $1 trillion. I don't think we'll get there, but he's making an effort, and I think he's getting some real traction. Of course, like in Silicon Valley, they're breaking things all the time, and that's something that President Trump has given course correction, now has the department heads very much more involved, the cabinet secretaries, and so I think it's headed in the right direction, although folks got to understand you're going to have some speed bumps.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's causing the speed bumps, frankly. I mean, the way to do what he's doing is send in your shock troops, as you call them, make your list, put the justifications together, present it to Congress, and then let everybody know so Congress knows that we're all aware of what they've been presented with. Instead, you know, this is kind of like the weakness of what you guys put together to me, is that you go off half-cocked, you get the numbers wrong, he attacks Social Security, he blames it for our deficit, which makes no sense. You and I both know that's crazy talk. And that's why I ask you about why Musk is in there. You used to be a little bit more muscular against him. I feel like I'm seeing a Bannon 2.0 kind of gentler vibe.
On these big issues, I've always supported what he's doing on Doge. Let me go back. This also gets back to this unitary theory of the executive that we've been, this idea we've been pushing, that President Trump is the chief executive officer of the government. He's commander-in-chief of the armed forces, also chief magistrate and chief law enforcement officer. And I realize that causes heads to blow up, like when he goes to the Justice Department on Friday. But in Elon Musk's case, the president has, and I think you're going to see coming forward, the ability to impound money. Our theory of the case is that the appropriations bill, which is law, is the ceiling, is the ceiling of what you can spend. And the president can make a unitary decision to not spend that much or to reprogram it. I understand that's going to be hotly contested in the courts and probably
controversial.
It would go to the Supreme Court.
But so you litigate it. So you litigate it, and I'm fine with all of that. Now, here's the first thing I need you to help me understand. I don't buy the, full disclosure, Steve, I don't know how much you've been following me here at NewsNation. I did not like the New York cases against President Trump. I took a lot of shite for that, but that's I sign up for that.
We follow you closely, Chris, so we know your stand on that.
I did not believe in the impeachments only because I thought you couldn't remove him. To me, as a political operation, if you can't remove the guy, the idea of a matter of principle didn't wash with me. Okay, so that's where I am on it. That said, I don't get this. The judges, these are rogue judges. Steve, you got rid of DACA by going to one district court and starting litigation that wound up at the Supreme Court. Same thing with the individual mandate. Same thing with Biden's tuition relief. You use the same system that they're using right now with the Alien and Enemies Act. Why is this judges going after Trump? What judge wouldn't have put a hold on a removal order that's based on a 1789 or 98 law that was never intended for this? How is that judges going after Trump?
It's totally different, Chris. And by the way, I actually think more of these radical neo-Marxist judges that are working in coordination ought to be impeached and go through the process in the House. I also realized that probably none of them will be removed by the Senate, but I think go through the process. The Chief Justice of the District Court, he's stepping into President Trump's role, go back to unitary theory, as the commander-in-chief. This has already been designated a terrorist group. President Trump made a decision as commander-in-chief to get them out of the country. They've been part of an invasion. He sent them out, and the judge, and people ought to look at what he did. On Saturday, he called together, he held court. Then he's asking where the planes are. He's making command decisions that a military commander would make. He's totally outside his lane. And we, with Mike Davis, are leading the effort now to get on the judiciary, get on top of Jordan and the Judiciary Committee to actually start the process of impeaching this judge. I'm a big believer, Chris, that the process, trust the process, that I realize this judge will probably not be removed because of a trial in the Senate. But I think it's very important to have a process here where this judge is actually impeached. And no offense, when President Trump said that, Roberts came out and did nothing but have these judges' backs with, I think, a totally out of line comment he made today. It's going to make this fight even tougher.
But here's the deal. You got to help me reconcile. I get attacking your own government. I get criticizing it. I get it as a fundamental aspect of why the founders architected the First Amendment the way they did, which was redress of government. That was their real concern. You got to be able to go after it so it's not a crown. I don't understand, though, how you square patriotism and the movement with attacking the institutions. You can litigate it, but this judge, he's not taking a command position. You're assuming that this is an invasion because that's one of the trigger mechanisms under that 1798 law. But a gang coming in here just because they're from Venezuela doesn't mean they are an arm of the government or that this is part of some type of, war act as contemplated by the law. You can argue that. I'm fine with that. But you're assuming it as a matter of fact and that this guy's some kind of traitor. And I don't get how you're a patriot and attacking the institutions gratuitously at the same time.
We're not attacking institutions gratuitously. By the way, the institutions of this country, and I think this is the reason the Democrats lost, the American people understand that our institutions have to be either purged or they have to be reformed. everything from the Justice Department to the FBI to the intelligence community to the Pentagon across the board. And that's what President Trump's mandate is. That's what he's doing.
You don't think that's because you guys tell them that these institutions stink all the time?
Chris, this judge is stepping in the middle of President Trump's constitutional duty as commander-in-chief. President Trump has made a decision. They're a terrorist group. He's made a decision. They're going to be expelled from the United States. They were on planes to a country that agreed to take them with a prison system.
But it's not a military. It's not a military operation. It's not a military operation. It was ICE. It was ICE. You would basically be running into posse comitatus if you did it the way you are, which is, you know, you wanted to militarize
it was tantamount. ICE did it, but it was tantamount to a military operation to get him out of the country. It was dangerous for this judge to insert himself.
Steve,
and look at the detail. Look at the way he inserted himself.
I'm not against getting rid of the gangbangers. That's not my point. I keep getting beaten over the head. You want gangbangers in the country.
You guys
That's
are
not my point. It's not my position. It's not my position. You can do it a different way. You can do it a different way with due process. This is not a military situation. You need a declaration of war underneath that law to trigger its removal mechanism. That's why you're playing at this being militaristic, but it isn't.
President Trump's belief as commander-in-chief, he's done what he's needed to do in the proclamation to actually expel these invaders that are dangerous criminals. And now the people defending them are in a horrible position of having to argue their due process rights and everything else. Let them argue it and let the American people decide. But President Trump is not going to take these people back, and he's not going to allow a judge. He's not going to allow a judge to step in between him and these decisions that are tantamount to military decisions.
If they're military decisions, it would be different, though those can be litigated also, and they have been. I do not mean to condescend to you at all. I know you know the history. I know you know a lot of the case law on this stuff. I've listened to your podcasts on it and your speeches. So I get that you know. I'm not talking down to you. Apology if you take it that way. What I'm saying is I'm fine with litigating it, like with those other cases that I instructed. Work the system. The way it comes out is the way it comes out. I feel like there's a new wrinkle to MAGA, which is anything that doesn't go our way is corrupt. And anybody who doesn't agree with us is an enemy. And that sounds like some real BS to me, Steve.
Chris, I don't think that's the fact at all. I think President Trump's been very straightforward. People have been very upfront of what we're going to do here to basically make sure that the criminal, and particularly the gang criminal elements, that's where they've been designated terrorist organizations. This has been worked on for a while. So, and we're not accusing people who don't agree with this of being enemies. There are domestic enemies. There's no doubt about that. There's elements of the deep state that are working against the United States, and I think those are going to be rooted out in the very near term. And so, and President Trump is very focused on this. You can see every day, President Trump right now is all gas, no brake. And so I think people should anticipate there's even going to be much more of this. And the only way the Democrats can fight us, because they have no political power. As you know, you've said this many times, their polling's the worst it's ever been. No leader has really emerged. They're trying some sort of resistance in the streets, not working. They're using lawfare again, which you were so against. They're using lawfare again in the federal courts because their strategy is to delay is to deny. To delay is to deny. And so what they're going to try to do is to fight a rearguard action and drag all this out. And if you read like the situation in San Francisco, that judge's order, when you go through it and the way he was treating the government lawyers, it's like a 2-year process. And that's what they hope to instill. And I think you'll see President Trump even double and triple down more on this. We have a constitutional crisis, and we're going to have a confrontation with these courts.
See, I don't see the constitutional crisis. I feel like that's the cell that I don't understand why you need to go there in order to say we want change. And if he doesn't like the ruling, appeal it. I mean, that's how the system works. That's how you guys have done it time in memoriam. All of a sudden, the system is a part of the suspicion. And I don't get that.
Here's, Chris, you have a judge inserting himself between the President of the United States and his role as commander-in-chief.
No, I get your argument. I just don't accept it. And we'll see how it plays out in litigation. But look,
I will tell your audience one thing.
Here's the deal, Steve. I'm not demonizing you for making the case. I'm just saying I don't agree with the case.
I got it.
That's all.
But I would tell your audience, understand that in the federal courts right now, this is the center of gravity of this battle in all these different federal courts, and it's going to be hotly contested.
I agree, but that's the way it's supposed to work. That's how we flex democracy. That's what makes us different in a good way. Let me ask you about one thing. Help me understand this. Ukraine and Russia, to me, it feels like when Trump came back into office, the script flipped, right? Everybody was yellow and blue all day long. When I got fired and I was sitting home watching the Ukraine war, I wound up going over there on my own dime to cover it and help Sean Penn do his documentary on the front. And everybody saw them as like some kind of extension of who America was when it fought against the English. Now, Trump is back. He never liked Zelensky because of that phone call, right? That led to the second impeachment or helped the second impeachment along, which again, I wasn't in favor of because I knew they wouldn't remove him. But again, and now it's like Russia, they're pretty good. And that now it seems like Russia is orchestrating the peace terms. Now, we're not going to agree to peace, but yeah, let's stop hitting the energy centers, which by all accounts, Putin is still doing, even while they're negotiating not doing it anymore. Do you believe this is the right move for America to be as accommodative of someone that your party has never trusted until now, Putin?
Chris, let's go back in time. If you go to the war room, and particularly the right, the hard right of the MAGA movement, we were adamantly opposed to this from day one. We would quote Professor Mersheimer at the University of Chicago on the eve of the war, that the West was going to lead the Ukrainian people down the primrose path to their destruction. What we've argued on the war room from day one is that this is ridiculous. And now you have about Ian Brummer, I think, calculates between 450 and 500,000 Ukrainians dead or wounded. The country looks like Dresden in 1945. There's 800 to 900,000 dead or wounded Russian troops. I mean, the casualty levels here are bigger than the first, from the invasion of Poland in 1939 to Operation Barbarossa in June of 1941, the beginning of World War II. This war now dwarfs it. I mean, this is combat at its most primitive. We've been opposed to this from day one. We have been a driving that we need to have a Russian rapprochement. We need to break Russia off from China, and the Chinese Communist Party is working together in that alliance they have on the Eurasian landmass. I think the call today reinforced the fact that President Trump and Putin are talking at a very high level, some sort of economic relationship, maybe some sort of potential strategic relationship that includes the Middle East and maybe even taking out the situation with the Persian nuclear program. So, no, we've opposed this from day one. That's why we've been a big advocate that President Trump and his team, like Steve Witkoff, should focus on the overall Russian strategic deal or strategic relationship and let Marco Rubio and others work on the Ukraine piece as a subset of this, because I think it is a subset. And look, the Russians, people ask me, can you trust Putin? I said, did Winston Churchill trust Joseph Stalin? Of course they don't. Right? No. The Stalin and Churchill, FDR never really trusted him. They didn't trust him, but they were great allies that lost, what, 35 to 50 million people in World War II in combat or starving. Right. You don't trust the KGB, but you're going to have to work on it, particularly if you want to break the back of the Chinese Communist Party. I think President Trump's geostrategic vision here is going to be the most significant since the end of World War II. And I think they're going to hammer this out. It's going to take months, but I think today was a pretty good start.
So, Steve, I know that you're relevant in not just working it in the digital media, but as part of that inner sanctum, you have an open invitation to come here as we go through the machinations of this movement and we see what's happening. When I need explanation from that side, we have an open door policy here. You're invited to come in to make the case whenever you want.
Chris, we're always glad to come back. We watch NewsNation, and you guys got something very special there. So keep grinding like you guys always do, and I feel honored to be asked back.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.